Jeffrey Epstein's private island has long been synonymous with secrecy, scandal, and silence, but that wall is cracking. Newly released images from the U.S. House Oversight Committee expose never-before-seen interiors of the Caribbean compound, revealing abandoned rooms and hidden passageways tied to the trafficking operation. Among the most scrutinized figures connected to these locations is Prince Andrew, who admitted visiting the island in 2019. The photos, silent yet damning, bring fresh heat to long-standing allegations. If you love getting the real story behind the palace walls, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update, including Virginia Dre's disturbing testimony involving a group encounter with Andrew and multiple underage girls. While he continues to deny all misconduct, the visual evidence rewires how his past is viewed and forces a reckoning with what may lie beneath the surface of royal privilege. What makes these images so explosive isn't just their content, it's the timing. As legal investigations widen and U.S. federal files loom on the verge of release, these photographs provide a rare visual thread in a web of testimonies, timelines, and evasions. With public perception growing increasingly unforgiving, and the palace struggling to shield its legacy, the revelations deepen the cracks in Andrew's already brittle reputation. Whether more disclosures are imminent remains uncertain, but what's clear is that silence and denials are no longer strong enough to hold back the tide of accountability. Prince Andrew was hoping you'd forgotten. He stepped back from royal duties, kept a low profile, and probably thought the headlines would move on. But now, a new batch of photos, released by the U.S. House Oversight Committee, have yanked him right back into the center of the scandal he's spent years trying to outrun. These aren't just any photos. We're talking about images straight from Jeffrey Epstein's infamous private island, Little St. James, the place already haunted by years of abuse allegations. The photos show rooms, corridors, private spaces, and hidden corners of the Caribbean property. And with every image, the pressure builds. Because Prince Andrew already admitted he visited the island. What he hasn't done is explain what exactly he did there. And now, these images are reigniting the questions he's been dodging. If you love getting the real story behind the palace walls, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. If you've been following this saga, you already know Epstein's island wasn't just a luxury getaway. It was allegedly the heart of a trafficking network, with girls as young as 14 brought in for the pleasure of wealthy and powerful men. One of the key accusations comes from Virginia Drew, formerly known as Virginia Roberts, who claimed she was trafficked by Epstein and forced to engage in a group encounter with Andrew and several other young women. That claim has never been legally proven, but it has stuck with Andrew like a shadow. And now, with visual evidence from inside the actual location, that shadow just got a lot darker. The photos themselves are chilling in their stillness. Abandoned rooms, beds left made or unmade, personal effects still in place, silent witnesses to a disturbing past. While there's nothing overtly criminal captured in the images, the context does all the heavy lifting. These aren't vacation snapshots. They are part of a broader, coordinated release by lawmakers demanding transparency in Epstein's case, because the public is still asking, who else was involved? And who's still hiding? And right there, caught in the crosshairs again, is Prince Andrew. What makes this even worse for Andrew is the timing. These photos didn't just surface out of nowhere. They were released as part of a renewed push for answers. The U.S. House Oversight Committee is clearly not done with Epstein's legacy, and this feels like just the beginning of a much bigger unsealing process. There are more files coming. More names could drop, and if Andrew's sweating, he has good reason to. Because let's not forget, this is a man who said he couldn't remember ever meeting Virginia Drew, even though there's a photo of the two of them standing together, his hand around her waist, Ghislaine Maxwell smiling in the background. He claimed he had a medical condition that made him unable to sweat. He said he was at a Pizza Express in Woking at the time of one of the alleged encounters. These are not the statements of someone in control of the narrative. They are the frantic deflections of someone who thought plausible deniability might be enough. It wasn't. When the allegations reached a boiling point, Andrew was forced to step back from his royal duties in 2019. Then came the civil lawsuit, which he eventually settled with Drew out of court, for a reported £12 million. He denied wrongdoing but still paid a staggering sum, apparently to avoid further embarrassment. And for a while, that strategy worked. He disappeared from the spotlight. The palace tried to clean up, But scandals like this don't go quietly, especially not when the receipts keep surfacing. And that's what these photos are. Receipts. They confirm that Epstein's island wasn't just the stuff of rumor. It was real, detailed, and now documented by the U.S. government. These images will likely become part of any further legal scrutiny. They may not show crimes being committed, but they show the environment where crimes were allegedly committed, and they place Andrew uncomfortably close to that environment. Remember, he already confirmed that he visited the island. That admission alone, in this context, carries weight, because nobody goes to Little St. James by accident. It was private, secluded, and, according to survivor testimony, a place designed to keep outsiders away. If you were there, you were either invited or you belonged. Andrew, of course, has denied all wrongdoing, but his denials are growing thinner by the year. The fact that he's refused to cooperate with law enforcement doesn't help. In 2020, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York said Andrew had provided zero cooperation despite their requests. That silence says more than any statement could. And now, with more federal files reportedly on the way, the silence is deafening. These new images have also reignited the public conversation about who else might be implicated. The Epstein case has always hovered on the edge of total exposure, but never quite crossed it. Names have been hinted at, documents partially redacted, settlements reached behind closed doors. But these photos feel like a warning shot, a visual reminder that the case isn't over, that people haven't forgotten, and that even royalty isn't safe for the British royal family. It's another nightmare scenario. Just when they thought the drama had moved on to Meghan and Harry or internal squabbles, here comes a fresh reminder of the darkest chapter in recent royal history. The palace has tried to distance itself from Andrew for years, stripping him of his military titles and banning him from official appearances. But they haven't completely cut ties. He's still a royal, still lives on royal property, still protected by the institution, even if unofficially. And that's what makes this so messy. Because the royal family is built on image, ceremony, tradition. But no amount of pageantry can hide the fact that one of their own has been credibly accused, and now the world is watching again. It's not just about one man fall from grace. It's about the system that enabled it. The silence, the deals, the lack of transparency. That's why these photos matter. Not just because of what they show, but because of what they represent. Proof that Epstein's circle extended into places many would rather keep untouched. And while Andrew might still be hoping this will all fade away, the public is already asking the next set of questions. What's in those upcoming federal files? Who else might be named? Will Andrew face more consequences? Will he ever fully cooperate? Right now, there are no clear answers, but the narrative is shifting again, and it's not in his favor. Public opinion is also evolving. Once, it might have been possible for Andrew to hide behind his titles. Today, people want accountability, regardless of status. The idea that someone can just deny, settle, and move on doesn't land the way it used to. Every time new evidence comes out, it reinforces a feeling that we haven't seen the full picture. And maybe we never will. But what's clear is that the past doesn't stay buried. And for Prince Andrew, the ghost of Little St. James is still knocking at the door. So, what do you think? Should Andrew finally face questioning? Are the royals doing enough to distance themselves from him? Or are they quietly hoping the scandal will disappear on its own? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with someone still trying to follow this insane timeline. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the scandals they don't want you talking about. Because as long as the receipts keep coming, we're not going... Alright, so where were we? Oh right, the unshakable royal disaster that is Prince Andrew. Because just when it seemed like his scandal had reached maximum damage, here come the receipts in high resolution. It's not every day that photos from a literal crime island, photos linked directly to one of the most high-profile abuse investigations in modern history, get released by the U.S. government. And it's definitely not every day that they connect back to someone who once held the title His Royal Highness. Let's talk about what these photos mean in the bigger picture. The fact that they were released by the House Oversight Committee isn't a footnote. That's not some random leak. That's a legislative body saying, hey, here's what's been hiding behind the velvet rope. These aren't paparazzi shots. They're evidence. And they didn't just hit the press for fun. They are part of an official effort to drag this case back into public view, because clearly the people in power weren't satisfied with how things were wrapped up. And how could they be? Epstein's death left 100 questions unanswered. Ghislaine Maxwell's conviction filled in a few gaps, sure, but not nearly enough. And then you have figures like Andrew, tangled in the mess but somehow skirting real consequences. The public wants more. Lawmakers want more. Survivors deserve more. That's why these images matter. They're a visceral reminder that while Epstein crimes are technically in the past, the damage is very much ongoing. Because if you think Andrew's just a side character in this, think again. Virginia Giuffre's testimony didn't just mention him in passing. She described very specific situations, group encounters, private meetings, all connected to the island where these photos were taken. Andrew has denied every bit of it, but denials aren't, especially when those denials come wrapped in contradictions and royal spin. And let's not ignore the elephant in the royal chamber. This isn't some long-forgotten affair. These allegations are woven into an ongoing federal investigation. The fact that Andrew settled out of court doesn't mean he's being cleared. It means the case didn't go to trial. There's a difference. A very expensive, very PR-calculated difference. And for a man who swore he'd fight to clear his name, that sudden payout was convenient, to say the least. But you know what isn't convenient? Photographic evidence. Let's be clear, none of the released photos show Andrew himself. But they do show the setting. The interior of Epstein's island estate. The beds. The corridors. The bizarre decor. The hidden nooks. The kind of stuff that makes you squint and think, oh, so this is what secrecy looks like in wallpaper form. And when you pair that with Andrew's own admission that he was there, that he visited that exact island, you start to see why this release feels like a ticking time bomb. The man admitted he went there, but says he saw nothing, did nothing, and remembers nothing. That's the official line. The royal version of who, me. But the more these pieces come out, the testimonies, the documents, the photos, the harder it is to keep pretending this was just a rich guy's tropical retreat. This wasn't a vacation resort. This was allegedly a grooming ground. And the optics of anyone being there, especially someone with a title and taxpayer-funded protection, are catastrophic. Especially when that someone is already embroiled in accusations tied to that very location. It's not just Andrew's credibility that's on the line. It's the credibility of the entire institution he represents. That's why the royal family moved fast to strip him of his duties in 2019. That's why his military honors were revoked. That's why he was pushed out to the public eye like a disgraced contestant on a scandal-ridden reality show. Damage control on a royal scale. But they didn't exile him completely. They didn't cut the cord. He still lives on royal grounds. Still benefits from royal security. Still shows up at Windsor events. Just not in uniform anymore. It's a classic you're out, but not that out. And that's why these photos hit differently. They reopen the wound. They revive the questions. And they force the palace to confront something they've tried to downplay. This isn't going away. Especially not with the federal files looming. That's right. The U.S. still hasn't released everything. More documents tied to Epstein's case are expected to come out. And if these latest photos were just the appetizer, we could be looking at a main course full of names, dates, and very uncomfortable details. Which raises the question, is Andrew mentioned again? Are there logs, letters, anything that adds to the already damning timeline? Because if there is, if anything new links him to the island in a more specific or disturbing way, it could be a total reputational collapse. Not just for him, but for the monarchy, which has gone to extreme lengths to scrub his image from their brand. And if there isn't anything new, that's not much better, because public perception has already turned. The people watching this unfold aren't asking if something happened. They are asking when will we find out the full truth. And honestly, the clock is ticking. Andrew's non-cooperation with investigators is also back in the spotlight. The U.S. Department of Justice said it plainly. He didn't help. They requested an interview. He declined. And while technically he was required to comply, the optics were awful. Here's a man saying he's innocent, that he wants to clear his name, yet refusing to answer questions. That doesn't exactly scream transparency. It screams privilege, entitlement, and maybe even fear. Because you have to ask, what could he say that might make things worse? Or better yet, What can't he say without putting himself in legal danger? And here's the kicker. Even if Andrew never faces charges, even if no new documents mention him by name, the court of public opinion has already issued its verdict. And in that court, the gavel came down a long time ago. The scandal isn't just about what happened years ago on a secluded island. It's about what's happening now. The silence, the evasion, the refusal to take accountability. It's about the system that allows certain people to walk away while others carry the weight of the trauma forever. And that's why this matters. That's why the outrage continues. Because justice feels incomplete. Because answers are still missing. And because someone like Prince Andrew can retreat behind castle walls while survivors are left to relive the past every time another headline drops. So what now? That's the question hanging over this entire story. Do more photos get released? Do the federal files bring more revelations? Does Andrew finally have to speak under oath? Or does the royal machine double down on its "we've moved on" strategy, hoping the public eventually gets distracted? Either way, these images won't be forgotten. They've joined the pile of evidence that continues to build, brick by brick, into a very ugly legacy. And for Prince Andrew, the title may be gone, but the stain remains. At this point, the Prince Andrew saga feels less like a scandal and more like a slow-motion train wreck that just refuses to stop. Every time the dust starts to settle, some new detail yanks it all back into the spotlight, and these newly released photos from inside Jeffrey Epstein's island are no exception. If anything, they've cranked the heat back up on a scandal that was already radioactive. You can't look at these images and not feel the weight of what they represent. They are not sensational. They are not graphic. But they are loaded. Because these aren't just snapshots of a luxury villa. These are the quiet corners of a place that becomes synonymous with exploitation and power abuse. And when someone like Prince Andrew confirmed to have visited this place, even once, that detail lands like a punch. Let's be blunt. Nobody's flying down to Epstein's private island for the scenery. The man had a very specific guest list and a very specific reputation. Anyone associated with that environment, especially someone already named in testimonies, should be subject to serious scrutiny. And yet Andrew continues to act like this is just a case of guilt by association, as if his only mistake was being friends with the wrong guy. But friendship isn't what this is about anymore. It's about proximity to alleged crimes, and his failure to explain anything about that proximity in a convincing way. What did he see on the island? Who did he meet? Where did he stay? Why was he even there, when Epstein had already been convicted of sex offenses years earlier? These are the questions that still hang in the air, and here's where the public frustration really boils over. It's the arrogance, the belief that silence equals safety, that because you're a royal, former or otherwise, you can just wait this out, ignore the media, refuse to speak to investigators, pay a settlement, appear remorseful but not responsible, and eventually people will forget. But people haven't forgotten. If anything, the slow drip of new information, photos, files, survivor testimonies, keeps the story alive in a way Andrew clearly didn't anticipate. This isn't a scandal that fades with time. It's one that festers. And now that Congress is involved, it's very clear that some institutions aren't willing to let this slide. And let's not kid ourselves. These photos were a strategic release. You don't drop high-resolution interior shots of Epstein's Caribbean compound just for archival purposes. These were meant to rattle cages, to reframe the public's attention, to make sure certain people don't get to coast back into quiet privilege while the rest of the world forgets who was tied to what. So where does that leave Prince Andrew? Back where he started, under a microscope, publicly disgraced and permanently tainted. The palace might pretend is a non-issue. A distant relative no longer involved in official duties. But that's a smokescreen. He's still very much part of the institution. He's still supported behind closed doors. And as long as there are survivors telling their stories and lawmakers pushing for transparency, his name will continue to come up. There's a reason why Andrew's comeback attempts have failed miserably. Every time he's tried to inch back into the spotlight, whether it's walking behind Queen Elizabeth's coffin or attending royal family gatherings, there's public backlash. Because people haven't moved on. And more importantly, because justice still feels unfinished. And it's not just about him. It's about what he represents. The double standard. The inherited power. The idea that someone so connected, so protected, can remain untouched by consequences that would ruin anyone else. That's what fuels the outrage. That's why every new piece of evidence hits so hard. This latest release is more than just a batch of photos. It's a reminder that the case isn't closed, that people are still watching, that no matter how tightly the royal family tries to shut this door, the truth keeps finding a way in. And let's be honest, there's a reason why people are still obsessed with this story. It's not just salacious. It's not just scandalous. It's about power, abuse, silence. It's about whether the systems that protect the privileged are finally starting to crack. So, what now? Does Andrew continue to hide behind lawyers and palaces, hoping the heat dies down? Or does he finally face questioning, real questioning, under oath? And if those looming federal documents include his name again, what happens then? Because at this point, there's no path to redemption, not without accountability, not without answers, and not while survivors are still out here fighting to be heard. If this story proves anything, it's that silence is no longer a shield. Not in 2025. Not when the public has receipts. Not when the world is finally demanding more than carefully worded denials and quiet settlements. Prince Andrew may be out of sight, but this story, it's not going anywhere. So if you've been following along, drop your thoughts in the comments. Should Andrew be forced to testify publicly? Do you think more names will be revealed when the next batch of files is unsealed? And how do you think the monarchy survives this ongoing stain? Like, share, subscribe, and stay close. Because this saga is far from over, and the next chapter could be even uglier.